Today on the Back to Basketball podcast, we have Valentin Rossinger. Valentin is a physiotherapist who after surgery had to spend time in a wheelchair. Because of this, he developed chronic back pain. At the time, he was studying physiotherapy. He then took it upon himself to get out of the chronic pain cycle. He went on to launch a podcast called My Back Recovery, where he hopes to assist people in their personal recovery process. Valentin and I discussed the biggest thing people get wrong about their back pain, the importance of movement, the role of mindfulness meditation, as well as tips for people who sit a lot for work. Remember to like, rate, subscribe, and write a review on the podcast, as well as follow us on social media. Okay, here's my interview with Valentin Rossinger. Today on the Back to Basketball podcast, we have Valentin Rossinger. Valentin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Darcy.
So I stumbled upon you, found you, oddly enough, doing research. I was doing a whole bunch of back research. I was looking all over the internet, typing in all sorts of different keywords, and then your podcast popped up. So it was kind of your webpage, but you have all your podcasts on there, and you had a podcast. You have a podcast called My Back Recovery, and in there you essentially go through all these different steps that somebody can take to essentially recover from their back injury or back pain. And I know you're a physiotherapist, so you have a pretty good sense of just how the body works generally. You understand kind of what's needed to fix injury. But when it comes to the back, it seems that you're an expert. And I was wondering if you could tell me about your struggles with back pain. When did it happen? Why did it happen?
Yeah, it happened around 10 years ago. It was during my education as a physiotherapist. I studied late in my 30s. I was a journalist and a musician before that. And because of 2 knee surgeries, I had to spend a couple of months in a wheelchair. And during that time, I had an episode of back pain, and that developed into a chronic pain condition. It was getting really bad. I felt it went over a year really bad. I felt like I had no perspective. I couldn't participate in normal social activities. Mm-hmm. I was pretty much always in pain, and it got worse. And it took me like 2 years to regain a normal function.
Wow.
And this could have been much, much faster if I had known what I know today. And this is what I want to share with your audience. I hope it will be of use.
Of course. It's funny. It's a very common thing. People who have suffered injuries and have gone through the process of finding out why they had those injuries, they are able to reflect back and say the thing you said is, if I knew what I know now, how different it would have been. I think that's so important because, you know, the thing that you were trying to do with your podcast and website is the same thing that I'm trying to do with mine, is so that those people don't have to go through the things that we went through to find out. They can just look at the information and hopefully avoid most or all of the struggles that we went through. So it's great to hear. And I was wondering if you could just kind of talk super quickly. You said you had double knee surgery?
Yes. I did a lot of sports, especially running and cycling. Mm-hmm. And pretty quickly, I started to have knee pain, and it went over a couple of years. I was really desperate. And after 2 years, I decided to do an arthroscopic surgery because no one really knew what it was. And I just wanted to see if there is something you could fix. Mm-hmm. And it turned out that the cartilage in both knees is very, very soft, and there's nothing you could do about it. So I'm still living with that condition, but I live quite well with it. I can train, I do sports, but in a totally different way than I used to do before. I can't run, for example, but I still do strength training and stuff. Mm-hmm. And that was the cause. After the surgery, the medical doctors who treated me, they thought it might help to not load my knees for 3 months. I wished I hadn't done that, but I was desperate to try anything. And out of this, it was really that bad. I didn't knew if I can work as a physical therapist. I didn't knew back then if I'm able to have my my own household to go and buy food and stuff if I would need assistance. So it was very bad, and because of that, that's what I believe today. Out of that loss of perspective, out of this severe psychic stress, I think that was part why I developed this chronic pain condition, the back pain. So after that, the back pain was much worse than my knee problems, and this was taking over.
That must have been a very. Sorry, go ahead.
It was. I remember that because it was 10 years ago. But I remember I was really waking up every day with that pain and going to sleep with it, and there was just no break. And probably you know how this feels. It tears you down, and it takes a lot of energy just to cope with the chronic pain condition. And it also affects many different spheres of your life. So you and I know this happens also to many of my clients which consult me because of chronic back pain. The loss of credibility, for example, with friends and family, because sometimes you go on a shopping tour, even if you are in pain because you want to do something, and then it gets much worse, and the next time your friends ask you to join, you say, sorry, I'm not able to, and they don't understand it. Or you're not able to travel, for example, as you used to, because you have to plan so much, because if you have a flight or a long drive with a car, it will be really bad, and you need a specific kind of bed, or I don't know what. So there are many sides to these stories, and it affects a lot in your life, and it's really a lot to deal with.
I think and you kind of touched on some of those aspects, is the emotional and mental strain that it can cause, because again, it's already hard enough being a human, right? We have to plan our lives and friends and things happen. And now on top of that, you're in constant pain, and you're thinking about every movement you make, because that one movement could give you shooting pains and you're on the ground. Like you said, you can't sit in a car for too long, or it might be the way you sleep, or all these different factors. And it just wears you down mentally and emotionally. And I think that's something with injuries specifically that people don't talk enough about. They kind of just say, oh, you're hurt, that must suck. And you know what, I guess, you'll be okay. But they don't actually know. And I think with back pain, it's one of those things when because you've had it, so you can look at someone else who's had really bad back pain, and you understand those challenges that some of the challenges you were talking about. So I was curious, are there things right now, I mean, you mentioned your knees, and you had to modify the way that you train. You're not out there running anymore, but you're still able to get in the gym and do things. Are there things that you do every morning, or do you have a routine when you wake up, things that you do to kind of take care of your back?
I do a lot of sports still. I don't have a daily routine. Usually I go to the gym 2 times per week or 3 times per week. That's not possible right now because of the COVID situation we're having worldwide. So sure. When that's not possible, I train at home 2 times a week, 3 times a week. Depends also on my workload. Training also needs energy, as you know. And what I try to do on a daily basis is a little bit of meditation. It really helps me to deal with the stress. I find it very beneficial personally. But my back is really good since a couple of years. And all that it takes for me is like once or twice a week to have a training routine that involves at least one strength training exercise for my back. This is what really worked for me.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I think that's important to find what works for you. And you said that because it's going to be different for everybody, right? It's not necessarily going to be the same solution for everyone. Now, there are some things that are probably standard across the board that you'd like to see in people generally to maybe mitigate back pain or avoid future back pain. But I wanted to read something from your website. I guess I'm quoting you in a sense here.
Oh, I'm interested.
This is the
What you
quote.
choose, yeah.
It's from your website. It's right on the front, so nothing crazy. It says, "My mission is to help you rethink your life with chronic pain and guide you through existing information and research, therefore assisting you in your own personal recovery process." And that's why I thought it was important to read that quote, because you had mentioned, what you do, and what you do and I do, very different. Um, Probably not very different, but the frequency is different, let's say. So I want to kind of talk about some of these recovery process things. So when you get a client that comes in, a back pain client, or potentially even in the research that you found, what are some of the biggest things that people get wrong when it comes to understanding back pain?
Very good question, because I feel that there is something that many people have in common, especially people who suffer from back pain or chronic back pain. And most of the people I meet, or people that consult me, they're suffering from chronic back pain. They are desperately searching for the cause of their pain.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that goes hand in hand with that is that most of them, they come with an MRI or an X-ray, diagnostic imaging procedure,
Mm-hmm.
that they got prescribed from their medical doctor. And this is something I really want to talk about in detail, because it really has a very strong impact on your recovery process. So I understand most people, they think if they're experiencing pain, for example, in their back, that there must be a specific structure that is at fault. And they think if they do an MRI, you're able to see what's wrong and that you can fix it. That's the wish. That's also the wish I had with my knees, And this is a big misunderstanding. Today, we know that diagnostic imaging for back pain is of no value as a first-line procedure, because there's simply no correlation between what you see on these pictures and any symptoms you might have. So let me give you an example to make this really clear. If you have 10 people randomly chosen from the street who never had experienced back pain in their lives, and you do an MRI with all of those people, of their spine, half of them will show degenerative changes in the spine, slip discs, you name it, whatever, half of them, even severe degenerative changes, but they do not experience any pain. And if you take 10 people chosen randomly who are suffering from back pain, also half of them will show those degenerative changes. And there's really hard bulletproof evidence, and this is also why this is part of every clinical guideline for back health today, that diagnostic imaging, early diagnostic imaging, it should be done very carefully and only to rule out severe pathology. And what do I mean by severe pathology? I do not mean a slipped disc or something, or a torn disc or whatever you might think it could be. It's really to rule out like malignancy, cancer,
Yes,
or infectious, some infection of the spine, or if you had an accident, a fracture. That's what it is really good for. So when you're having back pain, and this is, I really want your audience to know that, because this is one of the things you could do wrong or could do right. When you're experiencing back pain, it's good to see a medical doctor, because you have to make sure that it's not a severe condition like those I just mentioned. And your medical doctor, he or she will ask you some questions, take detailed history, do some tests, whatever. And if he or she might think, okay, it looks normal, then the diagnosis is just you're having back pain. In medical term, we call this non-specific back pain.
Mhm.
And that's it. Yeah, you don't try to find a specific structure, because we
Mhm.
do not have the tools for this today. It does not work.
Mhm.
So what should your medical doctor then do? Best thing he or she could do is to tell you everything looks fine, even though you're in pain. It's not a severe pathology. Try to move as good as you can, as normal as you can. If it doesn't get better, come back in a couple of weeks. And then he or she might again check if anything was missed. And if it doesn't get better and there is no sign for severe pathology after a couple of weeks, then he or she might prescribe you physiotherapy or physical therapy, and send you to an expert for exercise or movement. That's really the way to go. And
Mhm.
this is what many people, they just understand it. So there are there are many studies who show that the reason for the rising numbers in hospitalization because of back pain are mostly due to the overuse of diagnostic imaging. Too
Mm.
early, too much, where you should first start a conservative approach. And this is really something that this is a message I want to share with your audience, because
Mhm.
what the images, there are no harm per se, but what they really do, and this is also proven in scientific literature, is that when the people that are getting their MRI results, they see, you always see something on an
Of
MRI that
course. Of
doesn't look
course.
like a 10-year-old spine, you know.
Yeah.
And then people, they really start to worry, oh, I have disc bulging disease. You know, just the other day I was reading on a Facebook group for chronic back pain. I was reading someone who posted there, I have disc bulging disease. I cannot sleep anymore. My doctor won't give me the pain medication anymore because he said it's too much. And they're desperate, but disc bulging is not a disease. It's just
Mhm.
how most spines look when they're not 10 years old. Yeah?
Yes.
If you're
Yes.
30, if you're in your mid 30s or even 20s, you know, you will see some tear and wear, and it's just normal. It's like wrinkles on the skin, but
Mhm.
it's hard to grasp for someone who is in pain. And back to the beginning of my statement, people, they're desperately looking for the cause and for the fix, but it's not that
Mhm.
easy.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's funny because I was once there, and I remember when it's funny hearing you say that. So when I got my MRI, and then they're looking at it, and I'm seeing the specialist, and they say, "Okay, well, here are your options," and they were very few. I mean, of course, they said you can go see a physiotherapist, and I had said, "Okay, but if they can't fix me, what do I do next?" So I kind of was getting ahead of that, and they were looking. They said, "Okay, it looks like you have some disc balls in your L4, L5, and S1." Okay,
Yeah.
which does correlate to where my actual pain on my right side was coming from. So I was like, okay, well that makes sense. It's great to know, but great. And then they said, well, here's what we can do. We can give you surgery to go in there,
Oh my
but there's
God.
no, yeah,
Yeah.
but there's no guarantee that the pain will go away. And I said, what do you
Yeah, good
mean?
advice. Good
Right?
advice.
I said,
Let,
what do
let me
you
say
mean?
something on this at this
Hmm.
point,
Hmm.
because only to give you some numbers, only today over 2,000 people just in Germany are getting some sort of surgery because of back pain,
Hmm.
and every day. And most of these surgeries, according to scientific literature, are not recommended.
Hmm.
If you look at the clinical guidelines, surgery is like the last resort because there's no good evidence for it if you
Hmm.
have non-specific low back pain. So, but as the story you told is really a good example. You're desperate. You want to get a diagnosis and understand what's the problem,
Hmm.
and if, probably even if your medical doctor would say no, there's no need for an MRI, you would go to another medical doctor
Yeah. Yeah.
until you're getting an MRI. But all it
Yes.
does is it it causes like a fear avoidance behavior. This is
Hmm.
also a scientific term. People, they start to worry about their back. They know they have something. They saw it on their MRI, a
Hmm.
slip disc or some disc bulging or whatever, and they stop to move normally.
Yeah.
And so they're getting more and more cautious, and they're getting afraid. This also triggers like our pain center. Pain always happens in the brain. I don't talk about thinking other thoughts. It's nothing you can do about it. It just happens without your influence. And things are going south. Because I feel that what people are really missing out on exercise and movement therapy because they're getting an MRI. And this is also proven by some studies. I did a whole episode about MRI and X-ray where I also quote the studies. If you're interested in, go to my podcast, listen to it. But that's the main message. So people, they stop moving in a normal way because they're afraid. And with that, they take away the only thing that is proven to benefit them the most.
So that's great, because that's exactly what I did. I didn't get the surgery, and I said I'm not getting surgery, and I kind of figured out. I said,
You're
okay,
lucky.
well, yeah, exactly. And I said, what? Because I am lucky, because I know some people who got surgery, and a month later they were in the same pain again. So unfortunately for them, but
sometimes
now,
it gets better later on because then they do physical therapy.
yeah, exactly. They do
They
physical
start to
therapy
move, they
anyways.
start to train. They could
Yes,
have done it probably without surgery. And
exactly.
maybe if some people, because it's something you told me before we started the interview, some people, they also experience some neurologic symptoms, like some muscle weakness, for example, or numbness, and then they start to freak out. And
Yes,
totally understandable.
and that's what I did.
But even like those neurologic symptoms, muscle weakness, even a small palsy, if it's not progressing, doesn't mean you have to get surgery right away. There are a couple of studies, and we know this today, that there is the long-term outcome if you have like some neurologic symptoms, like muscle weakness, for example. If you have two groups, one that who just wait or train or exercise, and the other one who gets surgery, the long-term effect is the same. So like 15, 20 years ago, you said, if you have neurologic symptoms, you have to get surgery quick because otherwise you will have some permanent damage. Today, we know that's not true. And this is also something I share with many clients who have those symptoms. You're not losing out on anything. If you can stand the pain or find something that works for you, but you're just worrying about those symptoms, numbness, muscle weakness, you don't have to get surgery immediately. You could do it after 2 years. It would be the same effect. Other story is if you have progressive neurologic symptoms, but you always have to check with your medical doctor.
And that's great advice. I think that's really important that people understand that. Like you had mentioned, a lot of times it's the rest and physiotherapy that takes place after the surgery that is actually making the pain go away. Versus if they would have just done that anyways, they could have rested, stop doing all the things that were causing their back pain. So just rest and then start physiotherapy. They likely would have ended
or
up
any
at the
other
exact
training
same.
routine
Yeah,
that works for them. I don't want to
exactly.
label it. Yeah.
No, but yeah, like, corrective exercise, I would say, would be a good term. So, and speaking of
Exactly.
of movement, we're going in here. I wonder if you can now speak more specifically about the importance of movement and movement quality when it comes to back and back pain.
Yeah. So movement is definitely one of the most important things for staying healthy. The World Health Organization recommends at least 2.5 hours of moderate exercise every week, or 75 minutes of high intensity exercise per week, plus strength training in addition, in order not to suffer, get this, not to suffer from the effects of lack of exercise. So you should even do more. Moderate exercise means everything where you still can talk while doing it. And high intensity means exercise that makes you huff and puff. That's the term they use. So you're not able to have a normal conversation anymore. So it's quite a lot if you think like, because they recommend even twice those numbers. So it's 5 hours of moderate exercise per week just to stay healthy, With back pain, on the other side, it's a little other story. It's very interesting. I just did a little research a couple of months ago because I had a public talk about it, and there is no evidence at the moment that lack of exercise brings you to more risk of developing back pain. There is a little evidence about obesity or obesity. I don't know how you spell it, how you pronounce it. Obesity, thank you. Obesity and back pain, but it's not so many studies also. On the other hand, we know that a training routine can reduce the risk of developing back pain. But science is a difficult thing to do. And that's not the same as saying, if you don't do it, you're at higher risk of developing it.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
Probably maybe we just don't know it yet because it's hard to do those studies. It goes over years. You have to have a solid methodology. So maybe we come up with some new knowledge in the next couple of years. But what we do know is that when you're suffering, when you're already suffering from back pain, then exercise, movement therapy, call it whatever you like, is the way to go. It's the one thing that benefits most of the people in the biggest way.
Absolutely.
I hope that made things a little bit clearer.
Yeah, absolutely.
For example, there is no correlation between sitting time and back pain. We know that already. We have good evidence for that. There are many studies who show that. Still, we hear that sitting is the new smoking, but not, at least not, this is not true for back pain. It's true for your general health.
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, it's interesting. That's always the interesting thing about scientific research is that there are actual things out there where the studies aren't done, so they haven't even done research in it. So it's like, okay, well, we don't know. You can't say, for sure based on the research, yes or no. So that's always an interesting thing because it's like, you're like, well, if it's not, for example, sitting. Well, are they testing people who are sitting in compromised positions for extended periods of time? Because if they did that, then they would likely see if I'm sending and putting huge loads on my lumbar spine and I'm sitting for 8 hours a day in my computer and it's like that. I don't see any research that would say that that isn't a thing because, I know many people who experience that themselves.
That's true.
So.
But this is something that I'm where I really know my stuff. I did the research because this is a topic I also talk publicly in big companies for back health, spine health. And actually there is no good evidence today that like any specific posture causes more risk for back pain than another. So, but I want to go into this a little bit more maybe later on.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just curious about that because I have a few of Professor Stuart McGill's books, and he does talk about, sitting posture, for example, as something. And again, it depends what what is causing your back pain, because there's various different reasons. But if again, I think that's probably what you're getting to, right? Because we're speaking very generally about back pain, and,
exactly,
and your reasons for them will vary.
In a study, if you do a study and you put all of those back pain cases in one pool, you don't find anything that works for all.
Yes.
So, but
exactly.
Since the last 15 years, they really tried hard to do subgroups of people who are suffering from back pain. It's hard to find anything. Still, we know movement, exercise, education, it works best.
So I guess my next question kind of was about sitting, and we kind of started talking about it already. And so sitting for extended periods of time, as the research is saying here, doesn't necessarily cause back pain. Now, I know for someone who is already suffering from back pain, it can exacerbate the pain, because that's true, and I know that is definitely proven for sure. So but someone who's
always on an individual basis,
of course. Absolutely.
But I know many people who experience the same problem.
And I know like there are different strategies, having some lumbar support, for example, if that's what you need for your situation. But are
Exactly.
there any strategies that maybe you could give to someone right now? They don't have to be anything extreme, but just simple strategies that someone who does have back pain and when they sit all day, it does hurt them. Are there anything that they can do that you advise clients if they come in and say, "Hey, I can't sit for longer than, an hour without pain"? What would you tell them?
Um, yeah. So I did some research myself. I created a device which can measure spine posture over the course of a whole day. Like
Okay.
in two small sensors that you put on the skin,
Uh-huh.
and with that we can measure the posture. Um, During work, you can walk around anything, and we we didn't do really scientific studies, but we did some, like you could say, case studies. It also got
Hmm.
published from a ministry in Austria. And so we did hundreds of people, like, for example, desktop job at the Vienna airport, or also people who work manual
Hmm.
labor. And what we found is that the biggest group of people, they are always sitting in a very round or flexed position. Not all
Hmm.
of them.
Hmm.
You also have the total opposite sometimes, but
Yes.
like the biggest group, you see it's hard for them uh, to be in a neutral, in an upright position.
Hmm.
So today, if you look at the evidence, you cannot really say that one posture is better than another posture, but many experts agree that change is required.
Mm.
So instead of saying upright is good and round is bad, you should look what is the person lacking, and then maybe find a strategy that you get more of those postures that you don't do so often.
Mhm, mhm,
So, according to what I saw, is because most people find it hard to be in an easy upright posture. There are some easy things you could just integrate in your everyday life. So, as you mentioned, a lumbar support is a good thing. For example, and I try to show it to you. Um, you could just use like a towel that
mhm,
you make a little roll of it, and you put it in your lower back.
mhm,
And now, when you push back with your pelvis until you reach the rest of your chair,
mm,
and then you lean backwards, you see that the towel pushes me in an upright posture.
mhm, mhm,
And now I don't need my back muscles to hold this, because the other option would be just sitting like this. But
mhm,
this we know, there are some studies who showed that if you're using a chair that doesn't have a backrest, then people experiencing more discomfort.
mm.
You could say you don't need a study for that to understand that, but it's proven at least. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So just doing this, maybe this also causes more discomfort for you. So take something like a small towel, put it in your lower back, go all the way back with your pelvis, so you're behind the towel, and
Mhm,
then if you lean backwards, you create this push, and you can very comfortably, easily sit in an upright posture for a longer time.
mhm,
Next thing to understand is, if you're working on a desk and, for example, you have your keyboard over there, or your laptop or computer, whatever, and it's too far away, you again need to do
mm,
this. You need to lean forward,
mhm,
and
mhm,
then all the lumbar support is of no use. You're again in a very round, in a very flexed posture
mhm,
that you probably do most of your time. So how to fix that? Just use common sense. You have to be very really close to your table,
mhm.
so that you're reaching your keyboard or your mouse while leaning backwards.
I
And this is
understand.
also not a posture that you should do the whole day. Maybe just every just for having a change.
Mhm, mhm,
So I found this very helpful also with many of my clients. in order to make that work, it's really important to move all the way backwards with your pelvis.
Okay.
If you move forward, I'd show it in the video again. If you move forward, and I have this big lumbar support here with my towel, I'm again in a flexed posture,
I
no matter
understand.
how strong my lumbar support is.
I mean, that makes perfect sense, and thank you for showing it. I think that's important that people understand that they do have to push all the way back and sit back into it, so that
And
they.
lean backwards
Yes,
and be
yes.
close to the table for a change. Yeah,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
don't think that this is the only right posture. It's not. Round is fine. You can slump. It's fine. Also, there are many studies who show that if you totally slump in your chair, uh, you have more fluids coming into your discs, for example.
Mm.
So that's also a good posture, but maybe not for 8 hours a day.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
it sounds like what you're saying is that it's important uh, to vary the to the loads and the bending of your spine. Like it just shouldn't be the same thing all the time. If you can have it
Exactly.
movement in there, it's not a bad thing that's per se.
The best posture is always the next posture.
There you
So
go. I like that.
if
I
you
like
ask
that.
me what you could do is try to change a lot. Also, what works very well with many people is having a standing desk option,
Hmm.
maybe.
Hmm.
Maybe you can create this for yourself, putting your screen on a small box
Hmm.
and having a separate keyboard. This is also something very important. If you work with a laptop, get a second keyboard at least and a second
Hmm.
mouse and put the desktop on a box or something so that the screen is like in at least the end of the screen fits your eye height.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Because otherwise you have to slump again
Yeah.
to look into the screen and you never get out of this position. It's not a bad
Yeah.
position per se, but again, if you have it for a couple of hours, maybe that's too much for some people. Yeah.
Yeah, the best posture is the next posture. I love that. That's
Exactly.
really good. And I think, like you said, people can stand. So some of the strategies that I took when I used to work in an office job is I had a standing desk, one that I could just raise up and put down. So I would sit and then I would stand. And then the other thing is I actually would set an alarm. And I guess this is more of a general health thing, but also it works for the back because I would set an alarm and then I would get up. It's like, okay, 30 minutes, I would get up, go for a walk. I'd just go for a little walk or go to the
Perfect.
washroom, go have a drink of water, stand up a little bit, just to, like you said, change the postures that I'm
Those
experiencing.
small things that you just mentioned, this is really worth a lot. Yeah.
Hmm.
For
Hmm.
example, if you're working in a big office, maybe you don't use the printer that is standing right next to you. Use the printer in
Yeah.
another room and go there
Yes.
and get your
Yes.
stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Something like this. Yeah.
I think those are those little strategies that people can use. It's almost like if you start doing those things, it's probably the opposite of what you were doing before, which was sitting in the same posture for 8 hours. Which eventually, like if you had back pain and then it's just getting worse and worse, or it's never going away, or you weren't getting up and changing your postures. If you start doing those things, you'll likely start to see that you'll be able to get rid of the pain that you maybe had before because.
Or at least see small improvements. And that's
Yes.
what we are really looking for if we're in a chronic pain condition.
Yes.
This is
Yes.
also something I would really like to share because people, they come with this mindset. They think they have a problem, you fix it, and everything is fine again. It's
Hmm.
not so easy, sadly.
Hmm. Hmm.
What we are really looking for in the start of every rehabilitation are small positive changes. Maybe
Hmm.
finding a workout that doesn't make your pain worse,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
you're able to do more things, but maybe you're still not better, but that's like the starting point. It's an
Yes.
improvement. Or
Yes.
maybe with those changes in posture that we just discussed, or standing up, sitting down, you can work longer until you experience discomfort or pain getting worse. That's a big
Hmm.
change. That's a success.
Hmm.
Rehabilitation from a chronic pain condition takes a long time. So you really have to focus on those small positive changes. And I can tell you also from my own experience, but also my experience with many of my clients who had like a severe chronic pain condition, this goes on going better over years.
Yes.
I'm pretty fine right now, but it's still becomes better every year. And then when I look backwards, I see, yeah, okay, now I can sit in a coffee house and talk to people, and I don't even think about my back.
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
remember there was a time where I, I, I could not meet anyone in a coffee in a
Mm-hmm.
coffee
Mm-hmm.
house because I was just so miserable being
Yeah.
there. I can't tell you what triggered it, but it was a big problem for me. So
Mm-hmm.
these are things that improve over some. It takes time for these improvements. So
Mm-hmm.
focus on, try to watch out for those small positive changes and celebrate them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is well said. That is the case. I always use this when I speak to people about injuries or who've had injuries, and everyone who understands rehab understands what you just said. It's about the small wins, and it's about each small win, and they stack up on top of each other until you
Yes,
you know. And that's how you have to imagine it. If you imagine looking forward, you look at yourself now. I'm in a lot of pain, and you say, I just don't want to be in a lot of pain. You may never get there, but if you have
exactly.
that perspective, where if you change your perspective and say, oh, I feel a little better, or I was able to walk a little longer or sit a little longer, or the pain's a little bit less,
Could
you're
do
gonna
some
you
housework,
yeah, yeah, because that brings in the mental aspect of it, which is so important. So I know on your podcast you had a whole episode on mindfulness and meditation, and I'm curious if you could talk about the role that you think mindfulness and meditation can play in back recovery.
I don't want to talk too much about it because I'm not really an expert on this topic. I did an episode because it's something you could without spending money,
Mm-hmm.
try out for yourself, because there are a lot of free resources available on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And there is also a little bit of evidence that it helps with chronic pain conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know it by heart, so I don't want to go into too much details over there.
well, we don't have to,
My field of experience really is like movement therapy, exercise,
for sure.
creating a training routine for an individual,
Hmm.
progressing with that. And maybe we can also talk a little bit more later on about how to implement that uh, when you experience problems with playing basketball,
Yeah,
and this
absolutely.
aggravates your pain, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I only brought up the mindfulness because you did do an episode on it, and I think keep in mind, Valentin, like I'm not an expert at anything, but I have an opinion, and I know that you obviously have an opinion about mindfulness because you did include it. So, again, with this is not your expert opinion, but maybe if you can just share some of the thoughts,
Sure. I'm
you
very
can elaborate on some of
gladly
the
share
thoughts.
my
Yeah, just
opinion. Just
yes, your
wanted to point
opinion.
out I'm
Yeah.
not an expert
No,
there. Okay.
I understand that. I just want to know maybe what were some of the, maybe if you can list off some of the main reasons you had mentioned that it's beneficial, but in what way could it be beneficial?
So from I feel a benefit in many ways from it. Especially it helps me to step outside my small box
Mm,
for a couple of minutes. I try to do like 20 minutes every day, or at least 3-4 times a week.
hmm.
Sometimes it doesn't work because I have too much other stuff to take care of, but mostly I'm able to do it. And it really helps me to deal with the stress. It's like I have a short vacation.
Hmm.
And I'm I practice this quite a couple of years now, and it just helps me to step out of my thoughts.
Hmm. Hmm.
Doesn't matter what kind of thoughts, positive thoughts or negative thoughts. I'm just stepping out of it. And I feel this gives me um, a great opportunity to reset my system
Hmm.
and to be open again for new experiences, new insights that I maybe wouldn't have done if I'm just in my routine,
Hmm.
always just reacting to whatever comes to you. It also makes me feel more alive. This is also a reason why I like to do it.
Hmm.
Because if I just start my day with working on a project, or answering a call or answering an email, um, that's I feel like a robot sometimes.
Hmm. Hmm.
So when I sit down to have a little quiet time, do mindfulness practice, whatever you like to choose, I feel very alive. It gives me a good feeling, and I think it also helps me to deal with let's say with my chronic condition, because it gives me more energy, it gives me rest, and I'm also gives me a positive feeling about that anything can change.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I practice meditation as well, and I always, cue people to, tell me why it's important to them, because I think it's something that I think more people could benefit from, and so I think it's very important. I think for me, it's helped me be in tune with my body a little bit more.
Mhm.
So realizing, like we were talking before about posture, if you're not if you don't understand what being mindful is, you
If you're not
probably,
aware, yeah,
yeah, you probably won't
exactly.
even be able to realize what posture you've been sitting in. And the only reason you'll shift posture is because you're in pain, and that's too late. Like, oh, your body's just reacting, and like you said, you're less reactionary because
And
you're
it's no
able to.
fun. It's no fun always just reacting to whatever comes
Exactly,
into your way. It's much more fun to do something out of your own. It
exactly.
makes you feel alive. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I like that you included a whole episode on it. I think it's super important, and I think that anyone who's struggling with chronic pain, of course, or just anything in their life, they're gonna see some benefits. And you know what? After a while, it's just fun. Like, you enjoy doing it. It's something that I enjoy, and it sounds like you enjoy doing. It's a little bit of a relief. It's some time away. It's some time to yourself. So I think that's important, especially if you're in chronic pain. If you're in a chronic pain phase and all you're doing is trying to manage your pain, it's important for you to
Terrible.
take some time to get out of that. And mindfulness meditation can definitely help you when you're in those pain cycles.
Yeah, I really said this in a nice way. This is something that people who have never experienced a chronic pain condition, they it's hard for them to grasp that it takes such a huge amount of energy just to
Hmm.
cope with it.
Hmm.
It's something I really had to learn for myself. When you're in chronic pain, you cannot do the same amount of work that you did before. You need
Hmm.
a part of your energy just to cope with the situation, and it's fine. You have to adapt to that.
Hmm.
Make the
Hmm.
best out of it. Yeah.
Hmm. So I was wondering, if you could maybe, now we've talked about people with chronic pain. Now, so many people just accept it and they live with it. They don't get surgery because it hasn't gotten super bad. It hasn't gotten so bad that they're now in a wheelchair or they can't walk, but it's really bad. And they might be taking medication daily or whenever they have flare ups, but they just deal with it. And it's because usually they don't have a plan. They don't have an idea of kind of what to do next. So I was wondering if you can give us some steps that you would give to people who are suffering from back pain. Like, who should they see? What should they do to try to get them out of that cycle of maybe taking pain medication and then, being okay for a little bit, but then getting a sore back again. We want to break that cycle. What would
Yeah,
you tell someone
definitely.
like that?
So usually my first goal, it always depends on the person. So
Mm-hmm.
I always have to know what a person does on a weekly basis. I have also really professional people who do sport on a professional level who have a chronic pain condition.
Mm-hmm.
You have to deal it in a totally different way than when you're doing nothing, because what might be too less for them might be too much for the
Mm-hmm.
person who's doing nothing. But the starting point for me, at least for most of the cases, you can also not generalize this, but most of the cases I feel work quite well with this. Starting point is to firstly find out what is your baseline.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you always feel after playing basketball with your friends, just to do a simple example, after half an hour you start feeling your back pain is getting more severe, or your back discomfort is raising, and this happens regularly. It's really important to know your baseline. So find the activity that you can do without making it worse. For example, maybe you have to change the intensity of your game. in order that you can do it without being in more pain afterwards. So let me talk. Let's stick to the example with basketball, for example, because there are many variables involved there. For example, if you take the ball and just throw it against the wall or against the floor and catch it again, then it's a movement where you know when it's coming and how hard it's coming.
Yes.
So you can do it in a very low intensity, for example. When you play a game, there are many things involved. Maybe someone pushes you, you try to catch a ball in the last minute and do a movement that your body doesn't like. It's a different story. So also that these are the things that you have to be aware of when you try to find your baseline. What's the intensity that you can do, and what's the overall volume that you could do, the repetitions or the time you do the specific activity. And then you start to find a routine, and this could be playing basketball, this could be exercising, it doesn't matter. You try to find a routine that you are still feeling you are fine with. You don't feel worse afterwards. You don't have to feel better afterwards even. Just don't have to feel worse afterwards. And from this point onwards, you progress. You progress with intensity, slowly, over weeks, over months. You progress with overall volume. There are many variables to this, but just to give you an idea. So, and specifically for people who suffer from chronic back pain, I think it's also a good idea to involve specific strength exercises for your back. And many people, even professional people do sport on a professional level, they just don't know how to do that.
Yes.
So there's just a couple of exercises you could do, and then there are endless variants from those. But like the basic exercises is like a back extension. Like this is a dynamic exercise where you bend your spine and you go up again. Sometimes you're lying with your belly on a ball, and a gymnastics ball, and you're doing this. Or some people, they call it also a Swiss ball. It's like different sizes. And this is like a dynamic exercise for your back muscles, especially if you do it on a ball. It's really, even for people with back pain, most of the time you're able to do it without making it worse. Sometimes you have to change the range of motion, don't go all the way down or all the way up. Sometimes you are not able to do too many reps, but you are able to do something at least. And this is specifically what your back muscles do. So people have really to understand they also have to do something that involves their back muscles. And your back muscles, they attach at your pelvis, at your backside. And when you contract them, this is what they do. They pull your pelvis up. It's like a rope that is attached to the backside of your pelvis, the upper part. And when you contract them, it pulls it up. It also goes the other way. The same movement.
Yes.
My pelvis is fixed and my upper body goes up and down. This is basically the back extension exercise. So this is what the back muscles do. And then there are this is like a dynamic exercise. Back extension is a dynamic exercise where you also move your spine, and the muscles are getting long and short. So they have to be movement included. And the other kind of movement is a static exercise, like a deadlift, or if you do it without weight, a good morning. I think many people know it by this name.
Good morning.
So this is like bending forward and keeping a neutral spine. It's basically two movements: bending forward and activating your back muscles, and you do it together. You have no movement in your spine. I also have a couple of videos on my website, so if you want to see it a little bit more detailed, go to mybackrecovery.com to the resource page, and there you will find the videos where I try to explain this a little bit more detailed. But this is basically the two options you're having for training your back, and every exercise you do for gaining strength with your back muscles is a variant of those two. So there's a static option, not moving your spine, but still loading it. But you also want to have a dynamic option, because if you, for example, if you train your biceps, you also do not train it only in this position. You want to do this as well. And this is something I found really useful. Again, you have to adapt the exercises to each and every one so that there is no problem. Find it, if you're not able to do it, find someone who has experience with this. But also try it out for yourself. This is also something I share with my clients. Because many people, they're afraid by trying something they will make it worse. So if there are some rules and if you apply them, nothing bad will happen in most of the cases. So also check it with your medical doctor if you want to make sure.
Of course.
Also check in front with your medical doctor if movement therapy is something that you can do. But most of the time you can just try it out. So what are the rules? If you're doing something that you have never done before, start small. Don't do too much of it, because maybe you will get the results on the next day. Maybe your back pain will be worse on the next day. So it's sometimes hard to if you do too much, you don't know what it was. So don't do like 5 new exercises at the same time. Start with one new exercise and add it to the routine that you already know you're capable of doing it. Don't do too much. Start slowly, and on the next day, if you are fine, okay, this was fine, I can do it. Do a little bit more, and then this is what I mean. Progress with repetitions. Progress with intensity, with range of motion, and it's also naturally that your recovery is not going in a straight line. You're not feeling better. It's more like a zigzag movement. So it's better, a little bit worse, better, a little bit worse. And then if you look back after a couple of weeks, you have to see if you're better in the whole picture.
And I like that. I want to ask you a question. So getting back to the first step, which was find a baseline. So let's say I play basketball and I'm able to warm up fine, and then I'm playing, and then like you said, it's 20 minutes. It's been about 20 minutes. My back is starting to hurt a little bit. Should I just stop playing at that point and then know next time I go, okay, I'm going to go for 15 minutes and then stop. And then I'll go then 15, stop. And then the next time, maybe I'll go 20, then stop, 20, stop. And then maybe go 30, stop, and just keep building up. Is that how they should do it?
This is how I would do it. Exactly. Yeah. So on the other hand, there is no harm if you do a little bit more, and
for sure.
But you have to live with it later on. But sometimes it's more important to play with your friends or do something. But you know what will happen if it's the chronic condition. Deal with it. So the point I want to make is it's not easy to really damage your back. It's really not easy. If you look at the spine, and we did this as part of our education in Austria, you're watching, like, you're opening up dead people and anatomy, looking at everything. It's such a strong structure. It's like an iron rod. You can hardly bend it. It's not like that there is a bone, a disc, a bone, a disc. It's one structure. It's totally surrounded by very thick ligaments. It's like a baseball bat. It's really, really solid. And this is also something I want to point out. So it's not so easy to really damage something in your back if you have not a severe pathology or anything strange going on. Probably you will be in more pain, but that probably hasn't even something to do with your spine. You never know.
Exactly. There could be other reasons, right? Like, as we discussed,
many other reasons.
So I think we're going to wrap it up. I do want to ask you one question before we finish. If there was one message, and again, that you could give to every person who's just suffering from back pain, what would it be? And again, this doesn't have to be a professional research-based method, but just something maybe that worked for you. But so the first thing that comes to mind when I ask you that question.
Hard to answer. Just one. I think that if you start to take responsibility, that everything is possible.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
I
love
think
it, man.
I think that's my message. Yeah.
That is a perfect message. Uh, I think we'll wrap it up there. I want to thank you so much for your time, Valentin. It's been awesome. You have so much knowledge up there. Anyone who's listening, please check out mybackrecovery.com. There's a whole bunch of podcast episodes. You kept them very short and concise with the research, with some text as well. So definitely check that out. I'll have a link obviously in the notes as well. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much again for this opportunity to share this with your audience. And yeah, many thanks.
Okay, you take care.
It was a pleasure.
All right.